Hey guys, Dave from Nerdarchy, for nerds by nerds, hanging out with this nerd.
Nerdarchist Ted.
And what do you do when the adventuring party finds themselves on the wrong side of lawful good? I want to start this video by thanking our sponsor, Easy Roller Dice. Whether it's your first set of dice or your 1 millionth set of dice, Easy Roller Dice for all your dice rolling needs. You can jump down to the description where you're going to find a link to easyrollerdice.com/nerdarchy, as well as a one-time coupon code for a whopping 20% off. Go get your Easy Roller Dice.
We've recently been contacted saying, how do you make a villain, a bad guy, protagonist who is a good guy, who's lawful good, or at least, having a significant portion of his alignment being good.
Well, I feel like Earth Arcana, where they talked about rivals, as well as a lot of that got ported into Xanthar's Guide to Everything. That's like a good basis. That's a good start. So, one, you have to kind of divorce your idea from the idea of the only way to have a good game of D&D is there to be good fights. One of the things that makes for good D&D, in my opinion, is conflict and drama. But it doesn't have to be combat.
Yes, conflict and tension can come from heated discussions, an antagonist that has a definitive different point of view than you.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the TV shows that you enjoy, maybe like Firefly used to enjoy, or this different versions of Star Trek, but all these shows where there's a group dynamic, the best part usually is the interaction between the different characters. And then you have these like cool fight scenes and explosions and science fiction and fantasy things that happen, but a lot of the enjoyment comes from the interactions. So, in this case, you're going to have a good protagonist is going to be at odds with the party. Now, it could come to blows, and there's like different reasons why something like this might happen.
And if you look at all of your typical dramas, you mentioned Star Trek, but you could take it into more modern day stuff and not sci-fi or fantasy with like your hospital shows or your police
shows. You mean like
shows.
A-Team? Oh, who watches that stuff?
Average people. But like for the episode, you have a story of what's going on with that episode. And there's a cyclical what happens here. But then there's the long story of what happens over the course of a season or over the course of the entire show of what's going on with those characters. And that's the inter-party interplay that you're talking about. And that relationship, those conversations are what we're going to talk about here.
Right. Just because someone doesn't agree with you or doesn't like you doesn't make them a bad person. Whoever the you is, right? Mm-hmm. We're using that very generically. So we came up with some examples, one of them being the politician kind of person, the government official, maybe even like a noble. They could all kind of fill the same role where they have the best intent and they want what is best for their town, their citizens, their constituents, whatever it may be. But they might absolutely hate you, the adventurer, and all adventurers for that matter.
Adventurers in some cases, and especially in small rural places where they don't have exposure to the wider world, adventurers deal with trouble, whether it be because they're heroes and they go out and set forth to make the world a better place, or if, trouble just happens to follow them because they're adventurers, and let's face it, the GM puts things for the adventurers to deal with. So, in a big world scenario, trouble follows adventurers, and therefore adventurers in their town is a bad thing.
Yeah, I mean, if we had no adventures, there would be no problems, there would be no trouble. If this individual is popular, then, this sentiment may actually cross over to the general populace as well. You may find, you're not welcome in the taverns. No one wants to sell you stuff. It's hard to find a place to stay. This represents some real problems for you, as the player to overcome.
And with that, role-playing is going to get a little bit heated. As we've said, it's not at a point where you're drawing steel and it's combat time because you're dealing with non-threats. You're dealing with people who significantly don't offer any real challenge in combat. But if you're a hero and you're a good guy, you're not going to just mow through the commoners because they don't want to let you have a room or they won't sell you a new sword.
They've annoyed you. And, there would be some valid points. Adventurers tend to be nomads and vagabonds. They're outsiders. There is a possibility they're not going to be well received in the town.
With that, it's like, okay, well, are you upsetting their economy? Are you bringing in the stench of monsters? Are you the kind of adventurer that you're hacking up these monsters to try and use ritual components, and these things might stink. That might drive people to really want no parts of you. If like, oh well, I've skinned this chimera, and now I'm going to turn it into a cloak. Can I, use your tanner shop? What?
Why are you bringing these things here? Also, adventurers tend to take the law into their own hands as well. So that may not actually be appreciated by people that are already in authority. It becomes, it's a challenge to their authority.
And this would be a great issue to put a lawman or the town constable onto it. It's like, well, listen, you've just killed something that has the ability to think of its own. Some would call that murder. It might have been a monster who threatened to kill you, but...
And you wander around and don't have a home. Some might call that a hobo.
So that creates another dynamic, and you could have some fantastic role-playing with this type of character. And what things are going to build on that? Can you win them over? Or is this this is a dead zone for you? You're not going to be able to stay here because of, you failed to convince them, or whatever.
Or maybe there's a tariff or a tax when you come into town. They won't let you through the gates until you pay it. The guard sizes you up and looks at your group and go, "Yep, definitely adventurers. You guys have to pay 100 gold in taxes, 50 gold in taxes, 5 gold a head, whatever it is." Maybe as soon as you guys get into town, it's like, "Oh, you can buy stuff, you can stay here, but they charge you more than you're charging everybody else."
Because you can afford it.
Well, it might be because you can afford it, but they're like the barkeep is like, well, you're an adventurer. You're probably going to start a barroom brawl at some point, and then I'm going to have to fix stuff anyway. So this is my insurance against that, and so that's what we do. I
got to buy a new table because of you.
Yeah, it's going to happen. It's not if, it's when. So you may have all of this opposition, and you could literally run a session around maybe the players wanting to change that mind, or maybe they refuse the players' help and they really need it, and the town's going to be wiped out, or something bad is going to happen if they can't convince these townsfolk and the authorities to actually let them help. And if you're a good person, even though they're being stupid, you probably still don't want them to all die or bad things to happen to them. You might be annoyed. And this can also create some party tension and dynamics as well, because some of your party might be like, screw them. You know what? The ogres are going to eat their brains. It's their problem. We tried.
Absolutely. And that's just one option. If you wanted to go in a different vein, you could go more towards a religious fanatic, and it could be someone in that rural town, or it could be someone in a major city that has got a massive amount of influence. And that's where the crux of the matter can come from, is if you've got a person in power, they want to stay in power. So if a group of adventurers comes in and they're able to make a change in the area, or it's going to show the town that the religious figure doesn't have as much power as the adventurers.
Well, and look at Game of Thrones, the High Sparrow. Through political maneuvering, essentially, he was able to almost take over the kingdom practically, until force was exerted to take it back. But that would be a good example of a really charismatic figure stepping up and then imposing his will on everyone. And he's not evil. He's not really a bad person. But in Game of Thrones, everyone else is. So that could be the other problem. But, he's got the general populace's well-being in mind. And he also has a strict sense of morality that he wants to impose on everyone. And so in some ways, even though he was kind and nice, but he was also a despot and tyrannical at the same time, because there's only one right way. And a lot of the problems with the politician or an authority figure is the same thing. It's just shifting where it's coming from. But you can have other problems too. What if you come to an area and they outlaw arcane magic? They believe it's evil or bad. It goes against their religion. So now your spellcasters have a problem. Even your druid, they might not acknowledge that as divine magic or holy magic. God forbid you have a warlock in your midst. They may want to burn them.
And it comes from when you're speaking to the masses. You have the ability to influence them in a big way. So it might go beyond just the individual that's setting against the party. It could be the entire town. They all believe this way. Oh, magic is bad, or adventurers are bad, or however you want to do it. So everybody kind of gives you that dirty look or that stink eye because it's like, oh, well.
We also kind of came up with an interesting idea. We were talking over with Nate the Nerdarch, and that's the idea that the religious organization or religious zealots, they also, they want to proselytize. They want to do missionary work. So one of the ways they came up with doing that is, the barbarians that are in the kingdom or on the borders of the kingdom, they've reached out, they've contacted them, and they're now basically either stealing or purchasing their children to bring them into the fold and make them civilized and raise them in their religion and with their morality. But essentially, it's almost like slavery.
It's like slavery, and it's getting rid of the culture that's there, because that every generation the people are, being turned into civilized normal folk.
Yeah, maybe even there's warring tribes and they take prisoners and they'll capture the children and they'll then sell them over to this organization. They get goods or money out of it, but an organization gets to kind of try and breed out these savages and these barbarians. And then so like the players might come into this where if one of them is maybe from one of the tribes and they hear about this thing that's happening and it's kind of atrocious.
It's atrocious, but being done by people who don't see it as evil. According to their perspective, they're helping this tribe by raising them up right. It's a safer environment. They become educated. How is this a bad thing?
Right, and they're bringing them into the flock, So, they justify what they do, like human trafficking, by saying it's for the greater good.
So you can take that character in many different directions, and you just have to take that fanatical viewpoint or that fanatic viewpoint and take it to the next level.
So the next is greater beings of good.
And with this, it's hardwired. If you're talking about celestials, whether it be, angels or Chiron, or you got, the majestic metallic dragons, these beings have a huge amount of power base, and they've got the long view to look at. They don't care about the here and now. They care about what it's going to be like in 100 years or 1,000 years.
Like, for instance, maybe one of these greater beings finds themselves at odds with a town or city. The main difference between a protagonist that is good and one is evil, though, is the fact that they probably will try other means first. It's going to be a last resort before it comes to violence or things of that nature. But in this case, say you have, maybe there's a gate that's sealed, within that city that is about to break free, and, the city has to be evacuated, and the people, they don't believe it. They think they're just trying to steal their land and their goods, whatever reason, but they're not willing to leave. And this agent of good is also not willing to allow this thing to happen that's about to happen.
It could very easily say, well, I need to do this thing at this spot, because this gate is going to open, or I have to stop this plague from spreading. Whatever great evil is going to happen at this location, you guys need to get out so I can do my thing here. But if you don't go, I'm going to clear the zone one way or the other. And you got a ancient gold dragon, or you got a solar that's willing to step in and clean house. There's nothing the commoners are going to be able to do. Even, veterans of, whatnot. They're just not going to be able to stand up to that kind of might.
Even if you went down the road of, an angel who's is for whatever reason, they've been tasked with getting rid of evil in the world. And when they look at, mankind, they're like, wait a minute, you know what? A lot of evil comes from here. It seems like if we just get rid of mankind, we would just be done with a lot of this evil. We just cut away. I mean, we're going to have to cut away the good tissue with the bad tissue, but we can solve this issue and resolve it if we just wipe it all out.
There's lots of other races. The world will continue. We just get rid of this plagued arm of humanity.
Yeah, we just focus on other things. It could be, maybe a conclave of good dragons where one of them looks at, humans and dwarves and elves as, basically we would look at a dog. They're just animals to them. Their sentience is so small in comparison to a dragon's that they don't give them credence. They don't give them the same respect and rights they would to things that they consider sentient beings. So maybe they treat us the way we might treat animals. Well, we need that forest, so we got to clear it out. And well, so what? They're going to have to go somewhere else. It's not our problem. It could be that as well. We also had talked about off camera the idea of the long view of things. Like if these beings are so immensely powerful and long lived, they may be looking at a prophecy that is 1,000 years old, and they're worried about the end result, and right now is inconsequential. Not to mention, compared to a dragon or some other celestial being, the lifespan of a human, 100 years or less, it's a blink of an eye as far as they're concerned.
Look,
we're like fruit flies.
Look, I heard this prophecy 1,000 years ago of something that's going to happen in 1,000 years from now. I need to be ready to deal with this. And, like, you live, 50, 60 years? How many generations of your kind are going to be non essential to what's there? I'll just blink you out. No big deal.
And then there's the idea that maybe the party has something one of these beings need for whatever reason. And they're like, yeah, we'll negotiate. But there's some of the party just isn't going to want to part with, right? So there's a reason to have conflict there.
And some cases, it could be as simple as, well, we're gonna trade. Yeah, you got to give me that item, but I'll give you this item, or okay, well, I'll give you this information. So like that kind of parlay can be easy, but if your players, it has nothing to do with the characters at this point in time. The players are hard pressed. No, I don't want to part with this. Then it becomes a significant issue.
Then there's the other idea of your bad guy or villain being technically good, but he's a bigot or a racist. So, like, he is good towards everything except for this one group, right? And this one group, you might as well be chaotic evil, but, because for whatever reason, he doesn't like them, he hates them, he's been wronged by them, whatever it is. But, for the most part, they're good. It could be a gold dragon, right? But, one time, that dragon had its children murdered by a clan of dwarves. And from that day on, he hates dwarves everywhere and always tries to destroy them. And, hey, you have a dwarf in your party. The rest of you are free to go. But you, beard face, you're coming with me. You're going to pay for this.
It doesn't matter whether you're a different type of dwarf. You're a dwarf. All dwarves are bad, and I'm going to deal with it.
So there are just a handful of ways you can go about using a good protagonist in your game. I'm sure there's a bunch more. Jump down to the comments and let us know the good protagonists you've used, and you'll probably find a bunch of ideas down there. So with that, like, share, and subscribe.
Don't forget to check out the description below and get your easy roller dice.
So until next time,
stay nerdy.